name's Kyle Stark and I own Fortright CrossFit. We're a small CrossFit affiliate, and my gym, like most gyms around the world, we've been shut down for about a month now, a little over a month due to the pandemic that's going around. Last week, our president made some announcements, kind of issuing a plan about reopening the economy, and luckily gyms were in the first phase of that. So as I'm looking through that, as I'm reading through kind of the guidelines of that, I started to think about and conceptualize what it would look like for our gym to reopen, what we would need to do to kind of fall into those guidelines, what we could do to kind of optimize our experience for our clients, but also maximize and optimize their safety and their health and well-being as well. So keeping in mind like the guidelines for social distancing, for cleaning procedures and all that kind of stuff, I started to kind of think through what a class procedure would look like, what a typical class would look like. And the further I got into that, the more of the things that I was thinking of, the more it occurred to me that it was like a competition, right? So our athletes are going to have a set time that they'll be registered for ahead of time. They're going to show up at that time. They're going to go to their specific spot in the gym, kind of like a lane. If they were to do it a competition, you can think of like their class time is like their heat time. They're going to show up, they're going to go to their specific spot. Everything in that specific spot is already going to be there for them. So everything they're going to need for the workout is already in their specific spot, or what would be their lane if it was like a competition. They're going to do their workout, do their thing in that spot, not really leaving that box or that lane for the duration of the time. Then when they're done, they're out, they're gone like that. So bringing minimal belongings and stuff with them into their spot, it's really kind of a come in, go to their spot, do their thing, and then go back out. So they don't really leave that spot. And when looking at the social distancing guidelines, we're looking at, what does that spot need to be so that they're able to maintain safe distance between each other. In phase 1 guidelines, they're saying roughly 10 people. A gathering is no larger than 10 people. So what we started thinking about is, okay, so we can have 10 people in a class. What can we do to make sure that they're staying a safe distance apart from each other, and that they're, being also a safe distance apart from the coach as well. So luckily I have a little bit of experience with competitions, and kind of specifically in the laying out of floors and building out the competition floor and that kind of thing. And so I reached out to a friend of mine, Rob at SignsRX, and he's a vendor that we've used. It's a print company. It's a vendor that we've used in the past for competitions that I've worked, where he makes the decals that go on the floor essentially. And what those are is a textured material that has a real strong adhesive. So it sticks down really well. It'll stay down if it's mopped, if it's kicked and stepped on, if it's ran over with a floor scrubber, which is all important stuff, all stuff that we're going to be doing to maintain the cleanliness of our gym, especially with the reopening. And it's also, like I said, it's textured on top, so if somebody does step on it, or if they step on it even when it's wet from being mopped, it's not going to be a slick surface at all. And so the material is called Texwalk. But I reached out to Rob and I kind of told him like what I was thinking and how I was kind of viewing our reopening, and that's the specific lanes, the specific spots for people. And as we were talking through it, kind of what that was going to look like, I told him that I thought Texwalk would be a great idea, and we could sort of make a grid, if you will, inside of our gym, and each one of those, in each space in that grid would be the athlete's spot, right? And then we space those, what we're calling our athlete squares, we'd space those far enough apart from each other where they're maintaining that social distance. Even if they're at the far edge of their square, they're still maintaining that social distance. So I took some measurements in my gym. Luckily, you can see behind me, we have a pretty good sized space. The other thing that I did as I was taking the measurements is I moved everything out of one side of the gym, so kind of our big area of the gym. And if you're looking at this in the same mindset or frame of mind as a competition, you would have roughly the same sort of setup, right? You would have your competition floor, and then you'd have your sort of back of house. So we kind of did the same thing here. I moved all of my equipment over, used the rig as my divider. I moved all my equipment behind my rig, kind of against this wall, and that's going to be sort of our back of house area where the athletes aren't even going to go, right? So our coach will have the equipment before class, have the equipment pulled from there and into the appropriate lane. but they'll also, if they need to make an adjustment for an athlete, they'll be able to run and go get that for them. Okay, so that's our back of house, and then this is sort of our main competition area, and I cleared everything else out from that competition area. So I wanted it to be as wide open a space as possible, one, to maximize the distance that I can put in between boxes, but to also help it feel more open, right? And we also knew that we didn't want to put our athletes like right up against the wall. Like I wouldn't want my box to go right up next to a wall where I'm going to feel like I'm kind of like boxed in at that point. So took some measurements. We're going off the idea that we're going to be able to have 10 people in a class. So in my space, like I said, lucky enough to have a bigger space, I have roughly a space of 100 feet to 40 by 44 feet to work with in there. And so what I thought would be a good size space and even allow us to use some bigger equipment like barbells and stuff would be a 12 foot by 12 foot square for my athlete, right? So I'm gonna basically run 2 columns behind me, 1 column of 5, or 2 columns of 5, excuse me, 2 columns of 5. Each box is gonna be 12 feet by 12 feet, and then there'll be 6 feet going vertically, 6 feet in between each of those boxes. So even if I'm standing at the front edge of my box and the person in front of me is standing at the back edge of their box, we're going to still be 6 feet apart. In reality, we're more than likely going to be more in the middle of our box, which is going to give us more, like 12 feet of separation between the two of us. Also, with our width, we have a good amount of width from our rig to the wall. Like I said, is a little over 44 feet, and so we're only having rows or columns, excuse me, of 2 going down through. So being 12 foot wide, I was able to put even a 12 foot walkway in between those 2. So even if I'm standing at the far, say, right hand side of my box, I'm still going to be 12 feet away from the person that's on my right there, if they're on the far left side of their box, if that makes sense. And what else is that's going to do is allow us to put a coach in there, right? So the coach could walk down the middle of that walkway. Athletes on both sides could be all the way up against their edge, which they never would be in reality, but they could be, and they would still be 6 feet apart, or really, really close to 6 feet apart. So that would give our coaches a chance to kind of walk through and still be able to coach our athletes as they're in the class, and it's not going to put our coaches in a box where they can only go in one spot. So roughly as a layout here, it's going to be 12 foot by 12 foot box. I'll have 6 feet staggered in between them going vertically, and 12 feet staggered in between them going horizontally like that. So plenty of space, plenty of room. Obviously, if your gym was a little bit smaller, you could adjust the size of your box, right? And 12 by 12 is a huge space. It's plenty of space to do a lot of things. That's just what worked for us. You could easily take that down to an 8 by 8 or something like that, whatever is going to put that in a good space for you, or fit well into your space, I should say. But things to think about, again, is clearing out your floor, not putting those athlete boxes right up against the wall. So we took it 4 foot off of the side of our wall there, and from the rig. So we took 4 feet off of that. So even if they were on the edge, they're still 4 feet away from those objects. And we also allowed for 6 feet off of the back wall, and then the front wall. Obviously, the building continues to go a little bit further. So I wanted to leave enough space though in the front. As the way our gym is shaped, enough space in the front for the coach to be able to walk in front of the class as well, while maintaining 6 feet of distance away from that first athlete box, essentially. So I'm going to start to lay that out. I want to video how I'm going to lay it out and kind of talk through how in the past, like doing competitions and stuff, how we would lay out a competition floor like that, kind of give you guys some ideas on how to do that in your space. But again, the material that we're talking about using here, and for durability reasons and for safety reasons, is Texwalk. Tape isn't going to stick as well, especially if you're running it over with something like a floor scrubber, and then things like sidewalk chalk or something like that would also obviously come up really easy the first time that you mop it or run it over with the scrubber. Sidewalk chalk is a really good option though for you, like as you're conceptualizing how big your spaces are going to be. It's a really kind of cheap way to lay it out and look at it and put eyes on it, because you can draw it out on a piece of paper, but you're not going to know what that feels like until you're actually in the space. So drawing it out with sidewalk chalk is a good idea at first, but then a material like Texwalk or something that's going to stick down and stay in place for the duration of when we're going to be asked to do this and maintain our social distancing is a good idea. So as I talked through with Rob about the Texwalk as well, we decided to go with a 2-inch strip. Not a really big thing. and we went with gray because our walls are gray. It matches that. But the idea there is that, you know, it's easy to see, it's big enough to see, but it's not going to take up too much space, and he's able to get so many pieces on the material, so it just worked out better that way. So it's a really good person to talk through, and it was really good to have him as a resource for, you know, explaining kind of what my idea was, and then him being able to take that and you know, put it into, this is what we can do, like, material wise. So it's a good option there. So next up, we're going to kind of talk through how we're going to lay this out, and we'll get started on that in just a second.